what would you say are some characteristics or criteria of providing a quality review? I should say that there's no one right way to do this. I think everybody comes up with their own style, their own way of communicating.
I think that there are a number of features that make good reviews, that they're thoughtful, thorough, detailed. So when you're providing opinions, it's not just a one-line shot, here's my opinion, or it's not like this paper is wonderful or this paper is awful. Like a thorough conversation that pinpoints exactly what's making things good and or bad.
A kind of generous tone, a relatively kind tone is quite important, and it makes it much easier to hear somewhat critical feedback and understand what needs to happen without feeling bad about it if the person that is reviewing your work does so in a relatively generous spirit. So
I think that kindness is something that needs to come through reviews. And I think coming at the perspective of we don't know who the person who is receiving the review is. So it could be a world-leading researcher, but it could also be an early career researcher. It could be their very first paper out of their doc program. It could be a graduate student. And so the tone of the review is really important, and it should be supportive, even if the paper is going to be rejected from the journal. That doesn't mean that the tone shouldn't be supportive for those researchers. And again, kind doesn't mean that bad research or poorly constructed studies or studies that don't fit or aren't at the rigor or competitiveness for a journal get in. Rather, it just means the tone that you're using is respectful.
The feedback to the authors, I usually start with a paragraph that kind of opens up by thanking the authors for making the submission. I restate the purpose in my own words so that we can, I can communicate to the authors that I understand what they did. And then I'll always try to find something positive. Even if it's a manuscript that I really struggled with and that, I think is ultimately going to get rejected, I don't want everything I communicate to the authors to be negative.
I also think the conversational tone is critical to reviews. And so this isn't a dictatorship where reviewers coming in and providing like this absolute feedback that needs to be taken or else the paper is discarded. Rather, this is a conversation where the author or the reviewer is providing their opinion, which is filtered through their own biases and experiences and education and such, and they're providing this to the reviewers.
Then your main task is to assist the author to make the paper as good as it possibly can be.
I learned early on, after spending a lot of time, my first few years doing a lot of copy editing when I reviewed, I learned that that's not really my job. An editor for a journal once during a session kind of like this made the explicit comment that kind of left me feeling like I had permission to release that, and said that as a scholar in the field, my job is to review the manuscript for its scholarly worth. I'm not concerned as much with typographical errors and editorial errors because journals have copy editors who do a lot of that work in production.
This wasn't the question, but I do have pet peeves. One of which is when reviewers will click accept or click reject. So the two like absolute recommendations without any feedback. To me, this is disrespectful to the review process. I also think that understanding the position of the reviewer is really important. So reviewers are not making final decisions. Reviewers are providing a recommendation that associate editors and editors can then use to make decisions.
Then in the feedback that goes to the editor, you have the opportunity to be a little bit more honest and direct. That doesn't mean you have to be upset or angry or mean, but there are sometimes things that I think need to get communicated that I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying directly to the authors.
The last pet peeve I want to bring up, which I saw really early in my career and I've seen less of it, is when reviewers ask authors to cite their own papers. And so I've seen the extreme of this where a reviewer has listed 15 of their own papers and said, all of these should be in your reference section if this paper is going to get accepted. And to me, this is mind-boggling. As a reviewer, if somebody hasn't included your citation, then maybe your citation didn't belong there. Unless you are the seminal leader in a field and they're ignoring you purposely, I don't think you have a right to say you need to publish my or cite my work.